Michelle, you've written some of the most powerful things that have been uttered in the public square, but I haven't had a chance to speak with you since this came out, and I wonder. It strikes me that they are screaming from the rooftops, loud and clear, what they intend to do and how they see and what will guide their decisions. I'm not sure the reaction, at least in a policy and political reaction, is even matching how extreme their statements really are.
That's right. They're not holding back at all. And on one hand, we've already heard this and seen this from Justice Alito in the dissent in the Bostock case, which he was referring to. But you're absolutely right. There's no holding back, and there's all hands on deck for reversing what we've seen in terms of some of the most important constitutional advancements over the last 50 or 60 years. What's at stake right now is the dismantling of our democracy and rule of law. Everything from matters that address racial equality, sex equality, LGBTQ equality, all of that is actually potentially on the chopping block. And this is exactly what we see in the articulation of Justice Alito after his leaked draft opinion, is to say that the matter of Bostock is coming next. And one quick thing that we should address is that, he claims to be an originalist and textualist. Well, it was Justice Gorsuch, who also claims to be an originalist and textualist, who actually wrote the opinion in that Bostock case. And it was also Chief Justice John Roberts who signed on as well with the liberals. And so what we saw in that opinion is a bunch of folks claiming to be originalists and textualists deciding all over the map.
I want to just throw into the conversation something that, this is a conversation the whole country is likely to have, right? If these dangers reach all corners and people are successful in communicating what's happening, the conversation is going to be broader than just a legal one or a political one. So I want to read this op-ed from Margaret Atwood, the author, obviously, of The Handmaid's Tale. She writes, "I invented Gilead. The Supreme Court is making it real." Quote, "Theocratic dictatorships do not lie only in the distant past. There are a number of them on the planet today. What is to prevent the United States from becoming one of them? If Justice Alito wants you to be governed by the laws of the 17th century, you should take a close look at that century. Is that when you want to live?" It is a fact, and not everybody, not even everybody covering it, but not everybody read the draft opinion, and it is a draft. But Chief Justice Roberts confirmed its authenticity. They do hearken back to very, very ancient history, certainly a time when not only did women not have abortion rights, they didn't have the right to vote. I mean, what should we be looking at?
They hark back to a period. They hark back to a period where women had no legal personhood. He harks back to a period in which coverture, women were considered to be the property of their husbands, daughters, the property of their fathers. In those treatises, which he cites and the references to these legal scholars at the time, these were people who said there was no such thing as marital rape because a man couldn't rape this himself and his wife had absolutely no identity. I mean, he's citing to people that later on our state courts cited to when denying girls the ability to sue their fathers after cases of proven rape and incest. I mean, he's talking about a time in the United States that is so distinct and distant from human rights, from racial equality, from sex equality, and it is a time really of human enslavement. I mean, take note, he's directly citing a period of time in which this country practiced the kidnap and sexual and labor trafficking of Black people, and where women had not even a right to vote. That's what he's referring to.
Michael Steele, I don't have to tell you, you were once in charge of the political fate of everyone running under the banner as a Republican, but abortion bans that ban abortion in the cases of rape, incest, and life of the mother are like 85% issues. 85% of humans, Americans, men, women, Democrats, and Republicans think that's a bad idea. 65% of Americans think Roe should stay. The abortion debate, even on the right, is about things that don't actually happen. The right is against on-demand abortion. That isn't a reality in America. They've been sort of fighting against straw men. And I wonder if you think it's a political peril to be on the side of banning abortion, including their states looking at eliminating exceptions for the life of the mother.
Potentially. So let's start with point number one. The 20th century wasn't a bucket of popcorn for blacks and women, and certainly for gay and lesbian and transgendered individuals. So, if you've got to go back to the 17th century, you're in a whole new space of constitutional reasoning. The second point is you're absolutely right, particularly with respect to rape and incest. Everybody across the spectrum, and particularly in the pro-life community, always understood and carved out that exception because of the heinous nature of it, because of actually, and somewhat ironically, the concern for the emotional and other impacts on the individuals involved. So there's always been a sensitivity there. What Justice Alito is now saying is giving voice to an ascendant conservative position that looks in absolutist terms. And I suspect Justice Roberts and perhaps maybe one other conservative justice has a problem with that, which is why this was leaked, so that opinion, that position could be locked in place. We'll see if that's the case. But it is something from a political standpoint, Nicole, to your more important point, that has a lot of very deadly tentacles attached to it for the party. It goes back to what I was saying in the last segment. Yeah. We've already seen these laws come on the books, right? So the question to the people who live in those states, with those legislators who put that, what's your response to those legislators? Do you reelect those individuals? Because if you do, that means you are in agreement with that particular position for your state. And so in one sense, a lot of us who believe that matters like this belong to the states to decide, that's going to be a tested theory, not just for the legislators, but for the citizens themselves, if what you cited in the polling shows that they are much more accepting of a broader array of abortion rights than are being narrowly articulated at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess, Michelle, if you had one wish for how this debate proceeds, I think that it's always important to add this note that the political process, the legal process is slow. Women's lives are going to be impacted by this quickly, immediately. They already are in places like Texas. What is sort of your cautionary tale or your wish for how this debate proceeds in a way that's real and productive?
Well, the cautionary tale is that the United States is the deadliest place in the developed world for a woman to be pregnant. We rank 55th, not close to Germany, France, the countries we typically see ourselves as allied with. Instead, we're in the area of Russia and Saudi Arabia. It's safer to give birth in Saudi Arabia than in the United States. And if we look at Mississippi, the subject of this leaked draft opinion, 80% of the cardiac deaths during pregnancy are amongst Black women. So this is a deadly proposition that's taking place here. These are not matters of inconvenience. We're talking about death sentences that's occurring when we strip away the right to be able to terminate a pregnancy. And we already see that in these states that do very little to help people when they are pregnant be able to carry their pregnancies to term with dignity and saving their lives. So that's the hard part about where we are. But I'm also hopeful, too, because we've seen this playbook before. And really what this is a third Reconstruction that we need to call for. If the first one was to free Black people from slavery and the second one was during the Civil Rights Movement, it's time for a third Reconstruction. And central to that should be a reproductive justice New Deal.